The sun hung low over Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawns. It was the kind of neighborhood that looked peaceful at first glance. Quiet streets, identical houses, and neighbors who waved politely even if they didn't remember your name. But beneath the calm surface, tension sometimes pulsed like an unseen current, and today that current was about to surge. A blue sedan eased to a stop along Maple Street. The engine shut off, and the driver stepped out, Dr. Naomi Ellis, a poised black woman in her early 40s. She adjusted her navy blazer and smoothed her white blouse, carrying herself with the quiet confidence of someone used to commanding respect. Her gaze swept the street, habit, not suspicion, before she opened her bag to grab a folder of papers she needed to review later. After delivering a keynote speech at a legal conference that morning, she looked forward to a peaceful evening. Across the street, Sheriff Ron Harlan sat slouched in his patrol SUV, chewing a toothpick. His eyes narrowed as he watched Naomi. He had seen her a few times since she moved in 8 months earlier, and something about her composure irked him. He looked toward the fire hydrant near her car and muttered, "Too close. Most officers wouldn't bother unless there was an emergency." But Harlan wasn't like most officers. He enjoyed making examples, especially of people who didn't bend easily. Pushing his door open, he stepped out with slow, heavy strides. "Afternoon," he called. Naomi looked up and offered a polite nod. "Good afternoon, Sheriff. You're parked too close to that hydrant," he announced, his tone sharp. Naomi followed his gaze, then measured the distance mentally. "According to this street's ordinance, the required distance is 10 feet. I made sure I met that. You quoting the law to me?" His voice hardened instantly. "I'm only referring to the municipal code," she replied calmly. That calmness annoyed him. "License and registration." She reached into her purse slowly, deliberately. "Of course." He snatched the documents from her hand and skimmed them. "Naomi Ellis. You live on this street?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "I'm writing you a citation." "That's fine." He frowned. He expected annoyance, maybe even fear, but Naomi remained steady, and when a person didn't react the way he wanted, he pushed harder. "Step over here," he ordered. "For what reason?" she asked gently. "Suspicion of obstruction. I've done nothing obstructive. You questioning my authority?" "I'm clarifying your reasoning." "That was it," his patient snapped. "Turn around." A few neighbors paused mid-walk. A jogger slowed. A man mowing his lawn switched off the machine. The air grew still, as though the whole street sensed something wrong. "Sheriff Harlan," Naomi said softly, "this isn't necessary." His pride flared. Without warning, he grabbed her wrist. Gasps rippled through the small crowd forming nearby. Naomi didn't resist. She simply held his gaze with an expression that was calm, too calm for his liking. "You're under arrest," he declared. "For what?" she asked. "For obstruction and disorderly conduct." Nothing about her behavior had been disorderly, but Harlan wasn't concerned with truth. He was concerned with power. He forced her arms behind her and snapped handcuffs around her wrists. Phones lifted as neighbors began recording openly now. Naomi stood tall, even in cuffs. Inside her mind, she catalogued everything: his words, his tone, his actions. She wasn't frightened. She wasn't confused. She was thinking like the legal expert she was. Harlan, however, mistook her silence for compliance. He pushed her toward his patrol vehicle. "Maybe next time you'll learn some respect." Naomi exhaled slowly. "Sheriff, please stop. You're making a serious mistake. You people always think you know better," he muttered. Naomi turned her head slightly. "I know the law, Sheriff." "Very well." "That's so," he mocked. "Yes," she murmured. "It's my profession." He sneered. "What, are you some kind of paralegal?" "No," she said simply. He didn't ask what she was. He didn't want to hear anything that might challenge the version of the world where he was always in control. A few more neighbors stepped outside. Some whispered. Some filmed steadily. Naomi felt no anger, only disappointment. She had seen abuses of authority before. She taught entire courses on them. But she hadn't expected to experience it on her quiet street over something as petty as a hydrant. As Harlan opened the back door of the patrol SUV, she finally spoke with quiet clarity. "Sheriff Harlan, I am a tenured constitutional law professor. I advise the state on policing policies. I lecture on unlawful detainment and civil rights violations." He paused. She continued, her voice calm but firm. "When you placed me under arrest without cause, You violated several statutes and constitutional protections. His face blanched, just slightly. And everything, she added, glancing at the neighbor's cameras, is documented. He swallowed. Well, we'll see what the department says. Yes, she said, you will. Because by the time the sun set that evening, Sheriff Ron Harland would learn exactly who Naomi Ellis was and exactly how big a mistake he had made. The ride to the sheriff's station was silent, except for the faint rattle of the metal cage separating the front and back seats. Naomi sat upright, her wrists still cuffed behind her, though Harland loosened them slightly after realizing just who she was. But pride kept him from admitting he'd made a mistake. Pride and fear. He kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, trying to gauge her expression, but Naomi's face revealed nothing. She wasn't panicked, she wasn't angry. She looked disappointed, and that bothered him more than anything. As they pulled into the station parking lot, Deputy Carl Jennings stepped outside, holding a clipboard. He froze when he saw Naomi in cuffs. Sheriff, Carl called out cautiously. You, arrest someone? Obviously, Harland snapped. Carl glanced at Naomi again, his eyebrows lifting. He had seen her around town and always suspected she was different. Not the kind of person who caused trouble, not the kind who disobeyed the law, and definitely not the kind who ended up in handcuffs for a minor parking issue. Bring her inside, Harland ordered. Carl hesitated. Sir, maybe we should... Now! Carl swallowed his hesitance and opened the car door. Ma'am? Naomi stepped out gracefully, even with her hands bound. Thank you, she said gently. Inside the station, a few officers paused mid-conversation. Some stared openly, others whispered. It wasn't every day the sheriff brought in a well-dressed woman looking like she just stepped out of a courtroom. Harland led her toward the processing desk. We'll book her, get this over with, Carl cut in. Sheriff, may I speak with you for a moment? No, sir, please, Carl pressed, lowering his voice. We should at least clarify the charges. She doesn't look like... She questioned my authority, Harland hissed. And that's enough. Carl bit his tongue. Arguing with the sheriff rarely ended well. Naomi stood quietly, watching the exchange. Her voice was calm when she finally spoke. Sheriff Harland, I'd like to request my phone call. You'll get it, he muttered. I'd like it now. He spun around. You don't demand anything here. Carl stepped between them subtly. Sheriff, protocol says we allow it before booking. Harland's jaw pulsed. Fine, but watch her. Carl offered Naomi a seat at a small desk. Her cuffs were removed, though two officers hovered nearby in case she attempted anything, though what they thought a dignified law professor might attempt remained unclear. She dialed a number by memory. The line picked up on the second ring. Naomi, everything all right? The voice was warm, concerned, confident. Yes, Ben, she said. I've been unlawfully detained. The officers exchanged glances. Harland stiffened. Where are you? Ben asked. The Willow Creek Sheriff's Office. Ben exhaled sharply. Stay calm. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Thank you, she said. Please bring the documents. I already know which ones, he replied, then hung up. Harland smirked. Who was that? Your lawyer? Naomi folded her hands neatly. No, he frowned. Before he could ask more, the station door swung open and Mayor Linda Crowley rushed inside, heels clicking loudly. She was in her 60s, small-framed, and known for her fiery temper. Row! She barked the moment she saw the sheriff. What have you done now? Harland blinked. Madam Mayor, with all due respect, I acted within the law. She looked Naomi up and down, her eyes widening slightly. Dr. Ellis? What on earth happened? The room fell into dead silence. Harland's head snapped toward Naomi. You know the mayor? The mayor turned on him. Know her? She's the keynote speaker I told you about last month. She's been advising the state on policing reforms. She's on the governor's legal review council. Carl's hand slowly rose to his forehead. Oh no. Harland's face drained of color. She was obstructing. No, Naomi corrected gently. I was explaining the municipal code. The mayor glared at the sheriff. Ron, did you arrest her over a hydrant? She was disrespectful. She is a respected legal scholar. The mayor thundered. You do not arrest people because your ego is fragile. The station door burst open again. This time, a tall man in a dark suit strode in. Ben Harper, chair of the State Civil Rights Oversight Committee. His expression alone caused several officers to stand straighter. "Naomi," he said warmly, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Are you hurt?" "No," she replied. "Just inconvenienced." Ben turned to the sheriff. "Sheriff Harland, you've just unlawfully detained a constitutional law professor and state advisor. On camera." Every officer looked at the cluster of neighbors outside the station windows, phones still recording. Harland tried to speak, but Ben raised a hand. "Save it. This is going to internal affairs," Mayor Crowley added sharply. "And the council." Naomi stood, her voice steady and composed. "Sheriff Harland, I asked you to stop. I told you were making a mistake. I take no pleasure in what comes next, but accountability is the cornerstone of justice." Carl whispered to another deputy, "He's finished." The sheriff felt the walls closing in. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Naomi lifted her chin slightly. "This," she said with quiet authority, "was never about a hydrant." The tension inside the sheriff's station felt thick enough to touch. Officers stood frozen, exchanging uneasy looks as Naomi's words settled into the room like a final verdict. Sheriff Harland, suddenly pale, tried to gather his thoughts. His authority, his identity, was slipping faster than he could grasp it. Mayor Crowley crossed her arms. "Ron, sit down. I can sit down." He lowered himself reluctantly into a metal chair while Naomi, Ben, and several officers watched. Carl hovered nearby, looking like he wanted to disappear entirely. Ben adjusted his tie and began laying out manila folders on the table. "Naomi, let's walk through everything carefully," Harland scoffed. "Oh, come on. I barely touched her." Naomi raised a brow. "You forcibly grabbed my wrist, twisted my arm behind my back, and placed me in handcuffs without probable cause." "That's your interpretation." Ben slid a printed image across the table. "This is from a neighbor's doorbell camera. It shows everything." Harland's shoulders stiffened. "People record everything now," he muttered bitterly. "Thankfully," Ben replied. Carl cleared his throat nervously. "Sheriff, with respect, I think we should listen." The sheriff glared at him. "You too? I'm just saying, it doesn't look good." Mayor Crowley tapped her foot impatiently. "Ron, dig deeper and you'll bury yourself." Harland's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. Naomi folded her hands on the table. "Sheriff, let me be very clear. I don't believe in destroying careers unnecessarily, but I do believe in accountability and education." Her tone was calm, controlled. She wasn't vengeful, she was deliberate. Ben nodded. "We've documented the violations: unlawful detainment, abuse of authority, intimidation, failure to follow protocol, and physical mishandling." Harland scoffed again. "Unlawful detainment? Come on." "She parked too close to a hydrant. The required distance on Maple Street is 10 feet, Naomi replied. "My vehicle was 11 feet and 4 inches from the hydrant. The curb isn't marked. The law is clear," Ben added. "And even if it weren't, arrest is not the protocol for a parking infraction." Harland leaned back, rubbing his face. "Fine, maybe I overreacted." Mayor Crowley shook her head. "Ron, this wasn't just an overreaction. This was ego. This was you trying to intimidate someone you assumed didn't know the law." The sheriff didn't respond. Ben opened another file. "Naomi, would you like to file an official complaint?" Before she could answer, the door opened and a young officer rushed in. Sheriff, you need to see this." Harland snapped. "Not now. It's on the city Facebook page," the officer pressed. "The video of the arrest. It already has over 10,000 views." Everyone in the room turned to look at him. 10,000? Carl repeated, stunned. The officer swallowed. And climbing fast, Harland closed his eyes. "Great. Just great." Ben spoke calmly. "Then this situation needs to be handled immediately and professionally." Naomi nodded. "Which is exactly why I'm offering an alternative." Harland opened one eye. "Alternative? Yes," she said. "I don't want your job. I want your growth." The room went silent again. Ben looked at her curiously. "Naomi, are you sure?" She nodded. "Yes." Mayor Crowley raised an eyebrow. "What exactly do you propose?" Naomi stood, smoothing her blazer. "Instead of filing a lawsuit or pushing for termination, I want Sheriff Harland and his department to participate in a mandatory legal literacy and civil rights training program." Harland blinked. "Training?" "Yes," Naomi replied. "Comprehensive, thorough, evaluated, conducted by myself and other legal experts." Carl's eyebrows shot up. "You mean, like classes?" Exactly. Harlan leaned forward skeptically. You want to teach us? No, Naomi answered. I want to educate you. There's a difference, Carl whispered to another deputy. Honestly, we kind of need that. Naomi continued. Sheriff, your job holds extraordinary responsibility. The public relies on you to know the law, not to assume it, and not to weaponize it. Ben folded his arms. It's a generous offer, much more generous than I would have made. Harlan swallowed. And if I refuse? Naomi looked at him steadily. Then the official complaint proceeds. Internal Affairs will investigate. So will the Civil Rights Oversight Committee. The mayor will file her own report. And the governor, who personally invited me to advise on policing, will request documentation. The sheriff's face turned ashen. So my choices are, take your training or lose my badge. No, Naomi clarified. Your choices are learn or face accountability. Harlan stared at her. For the first time, his expression didn't hold arrogance. It held something else, fear. Not of Naomi, not of the law, but of the truth. Carl stepped forward hesitantly. Sheriff, maybe this is a chance to change things, for all of us. Other officers nodded subtly. Harlan looked at them, surprised. He had expected loyalty, blind loyalty, but what he saw instead was something different. Hope. Hope for improvement. Hope for leadership that actually protected, not controlled. Naomi softened her voice. Sheriff Harlan, I don't want to fight you. I want to help you lead better. The mayor sighed deeply. Ron, accept the offer. He lowered his head. After a long moment he murmured, Fine, I'll do the training. Naomi nodded respectfully. Good, then we move forward. At that moment, the station door opened again, and in walked a group of reporters, microphones raised. Harlan groaned. Oh, for the love of... But Naomi stepped forward. Sheriff Harlan and I, she said calmly, have an announcement to make. Camera flashes burst like tiny explosions as reporters swarmed into the sheriff's station lobby, microphones extended, voices overlapping in chaotic urgency. Officers straightened their uniforms, some stepping back, others forming a loose barrier. Sheriff Harlan's face tightened. He had handled reporters before, but never under circumstances like these. Naomi, however, stood tall and composed, her poise radiating through the room. When one reporter shouted, Dr. Ellis, were you wrongfully arrested? She lifted a gentle hand, immediately commanding silence. Please, she said calmly, allow us to speak one at a time. Her voice was soft, but carried the authority of someone who'd lectured in packed halls and advised state officials. Even Harlan, shoulders tense, instinctively waited for her cue. A female reporter stepped forward. Dr. Ellis, can you tell us what happened today? Naomi nodded. Certainly. Earlier this afternoon, I was detained during a misunderstanding regarding a parking regulation. The situation escalated unnecessarily, leading to an arrest. Reporters scribbled rapidly. Harlan cleared his throat. It wasn't... He stopped when Mayor Crowley shot him a warning glare. Naomi continued smoothly. However, rather than focusing on blame, we've chosen to focus on solutions. A male reporter raised his hand. Solutions? Does that mean you're not pressing charges? No, Naomi replied. I believe in accountability that builds rather than destroys. Sheriff Harlan and the department will be participating in a comprehensive legal literacy and civil rights training program. The reporters murmured among themselves. Cameras zoomed closer. Harlan stepped beside her, shoulders stiff, but his voice surprisingly steady. I acknowledge that the situation could have been handled differently, and I accept the professor's offer. The honesty, though strained, surprised some of the officers watching. Carl couldn't help but exhale quietly, as though a weight had lifted. A journalist leaned forward. Sheriff, why agree to the training? He hesitated, glancing at Naomi before speaking. Because the law is always evolving, and so should we. I want my department to serve this community properly. He swallowed. Even if it means learning where we fell short. Naomi nodded approvingly. Growth begins with recognition. Another reporter asked, Dr. Ellis, what message do you hope this sends to the public? That justice isn't about punishment, it's about improvement, she replied. Accountability must exist, yes, but growth is the true goal. When law enforcement and citizens understand the law together, trust can be rebuilt. The mayor stepped forward, seizing the moment. This training will be adopted across the county, she announced. Dr. Ellis has graciously offered to lead the pilot program. More murmurs, more flashing lights. Meanwhile, through the station's glass doors, the crowd outside grew larger. Neighbors, activists, curious passers-by. Some held signs calling for justice. Others simply held their phones high, capturing the historic moment. Ben watched them through the window, nodding thoughtfully. "This could become a model for other departments," he whispered to Naomi. "That's the hope," she murmured back. One tall reporter raised his hand. "Sheriff Harland, what would you like to say to Dr. Ellis?" Harland froze. Every camera turned toward him. Officers stiffened. The mayor braced herself. He looked at Naomi. Her expression was calm, not triumphant, not mocking, just waiting. Harland exhaled slowly and said, "Dr. Ellis, I apologize for how I handled things today. I let my assumptions, not the law, guide my actions." A hush fell over the room. Naomi gave a respectful nod. Acknowledged. Sheriff. Reporters scribbled furiously. Some even looked moved. Harland continued, voice lower. "I intend to correct that," Naomi replied gently, "and I intend to help you." The tension in the room softened, just slightly. A bridge had been built, fragile but real. A reporter asked Naomi, "How soon does the training begin?" Immediately she answered, "Tomorrow morning at 8. Mandatory attendance." Carl whispered, "I better get a new notebook." Harland overheard, almost smiling despite himself. But the moment of ease was interrupted when someone from the crowd outside pushed the door open. A teenage boy, maybe 16, stepped inside timidly, holding his phone. "Ma'am," the boy said to Naomi, "my grandma, she lives on Maple Street. She saw the video. She told me to tell you, thank you. People are scared of the sheriff sometimes." He glanced nervously at Harland. "No offense." Harland lowered his eyes. Naomi approached the boy. "Tell your grandmother she's welcome. Change happens slowly, but it's happening." The boy nodded gratefully before slipping back outside. Ben spoke quietly. "You see, this is why your approach matters." Naomi smiled faintly. "People deserve safety, not fear." Harland heard every word. The reporters finally dispersed, leaving a calmer but heavier atmosphere behind. Officers slowly returned to their tasks, though many paused to offer Naomi polite smiles or respectful nods. When the station finally emptied, Harland approached Naomi awkwardly. "Professor Ellis," he began, tone humbler than before. "I meant what I said. I want the training. I want to do better." Naomi studied him for a moment before responding. "Sheriff, growth requires honesty. With yourself first, then with your community." He nodded solemnly. "I understand." "Good," she said softly. "Then we're moving in the right direction." As she and Ben prepared to leave, Mayor Crowley pulled Harland aside. "Ron," she said, "you're lucky. Use this chance wisely." He swallowed. "I intend to—" Outside, as Naomi stepped into the cool evening air, she glanced back at the station, the place where she'd entered as a detainee and now left as a reformer. The crowd outside applauded. She wasn't expecting it, but she acknowledged them with a warm, humble nod. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a transformation Willow Creek desperately